Well, we're now in the new year 2023, and if you're facing problems in this new year and you need a breakthrough, and you need a miraculous breakthrough in a sense, then it's a good idea to stay with me on this channel because I'm explaining how to get your breakthrough. How do you actually work a miracle? 1 Corinthians 12 and verse 10, the Apostle Paul talks about the gifts of the Spirit. And one of them is the working of miracles, not just miracles, but the working. How do you do this? Second thing you need to do after finding a mentor is to study in a Bible school. While Israel was a united kingdom under one king, in other words, there was Saul and there was David and there was Solomon, and then the kingdom divided, remember? While it was a united kingdom, and even when it was divided into northern and southern kingdoms, there were established at 6 centres around the kingdom, 6 centres where there was a school of prophets. They were Ramah, Bethel, Gilgal, Jericho, Carmel and Samaria. Those were the 6 centres on the circuit. Elijah knew this, he was part of this. Samuel obviously was the one who probably founded these centres. Elijah knew about these centres, he was a prophet, that's why he was in Carmel. And these were important training centres. Remember when Elijah went up to heaven in the chariot of fire, Elijah and Elisha were travelling between 2 of these centres, between Gilgal and Bethel. 2 Kings 2 and verse 1. And from there they moved on to Jericho, 2 Kings 2 and verse 4. Now at Jericho, Elisha, he picked up the mantle of Elijah and he was at Jericho, and the sons of the prophets, in other words the students, were saying, let's go and look for the body of Elijah because maybe he got dropped off in a valley somewhere. Elisha was not in favour of this, but he let them do it. And so he stayed at Jericho for a little while. And it was there that he started to move in the miraculous. Now I'm going to look at about 4 miracles today and analyse their stages, what happened in each stage, so that you can see the way in which you could work a miracle for yourself. Jericho was a large town, but its water supply was polluted and it was causing miscarriages in the people and in the animals. So that was presented to Elisha as a problem. He identified the need. There was polluted water. So he then got the people to act in faith. He said, bring me a new bowl. And he put some salt into the bowl and he threw the salt into the water source where the waters were at source. Now he then prophesied, spoke over that water supply, and he prophesied and decreed that that water supply would now be healed and that miscarriages and barrenness would stop. It stopped. That was it. There was no long pleading with God and going into fasting and prayer. He made a decree. The prophet made a decree, identified a problem, and then got the people to act in faith. That's the pattern. Miracle number 2. After that, after leaving Jericho, Elisha then travelled back to Gilgal, and a gang of kids came out of the woods and were criticising him. He was travelling along the road. They came out and go, yeah, baldy, bald head. He had a bald head. But instead of ignoring the behaviour, instead of ignoring the problem, he confronted it. Confrontation is a key. He proclaimed a curse on them, and 2 she-bears came out of the woods and ripped up 42 boys. 2 Kings 2, 23 to 25. Don't mess with the prophets. Don't mess with their words. Don't, and above all, don't make fun of them. So, after moving on to Gilgal, he then completed the circuit to Carmel and back to Samaria, which was the capital of the northern kingdom. Now, miracle number 3. One of the trainee prophets in the school had died and he'd left a widow and her 2 sons. And the only way out for this lady was to sell her sons as slaves. Now, this, of course, was a very bad option, and this poor woman, this is in 2 Kings 4, verses 1 to 7. 2 Kings 4, verses 1 to 7. The only way out was to sell her boy into slavery, and that was not really what she wanted to do. So Elisha asked her what she had in her house, and she said, just a pot of oil. So look at the stages again. He identified the need and inquired what was available. He then asked her to do an action of faith. He said, go and ask your neighbours, get as many jars and pots as you can, lots of them. When she'd done that, he then took the oil in the jar and poured it into each vessel. And the oil kept flowing until the last jar was full. And when all the jars were full, Elisha told the widow, sell the oil and pay your debt. That's neat, isn't it? Now, looking through number 4, Elisha went to a place called Shunem, north of Mount Gilboa. And there was a great woman there who welcomed him and gave him meals and made a new bedroom on the top of her house so the prophet could rest. When Elisha and his servant Gehazi saw this, Elisha wanted to do something for her in return. He found out what was wrong and what she needed, and she told him she was barren. So he prophesied a son for her by the time next year that he would pass by. She was somewhat doubtful, but nevertheless she conceived and bore a son, just as the prophet had spoken. 2 Kings 4, 8 to 17. Once again, the stages, the man of God is honoured by hospitality, the need is identified, the prophet makes a decree, and the prophet's words come to pass, and the miracle is complete. Now, in contrast, what is the normal pattern of behaviour when we, or people we know, need a miracle? What do? They plead, they beg, they go into extensive periods of unproductive prayer. Isn't it time to follow the biblical pattern and release faith-filled words by decree? Amen? See you again soon.